Hey everybody, welcome back to the Delineation. I believe this is episode 18. I'm here with Cameron Allen for the second time. You are the first guest to be on my podcast twice now.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here, Cameron. How are you?
Yeah, I'm chilling. I'm glad to be here, and I'm honored to be the second time person for the first time. Yeah.
Yeah. So from what I'll do my own introduction of you, then I'd love your own introduction. I know Cameron Allen. I think we met off Twitter before Norwalk of 2019. And Cameron is a big inspiration to me because he's really big into medical astrology, health, and the way that he can blend his spiritual practice with, like, your just regular life is, really inspiring. I remember, when I first got into astrology and getting to the spiritual and the health stuff, it wasn't necessarily my thing versus now that I'm kind of more on my path, it's been much more in my face. So when I look at your content, it's just so much more valuable now that I kind of understand a little bit more of like the perspective that you're coming from, being so, having my own health journey and everything. But yeah, so I would love to do your own introduction for the audience. I know you've done this before, but this is a whole different vibe. I have Cameron's. You're doing lectures at ISAR, so I got you here. But anyway, do your introduction.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, like he said, my name is Cameron Allen, and yeah. So right now I'm in Ayurveda school actually, and so that's been really amazing. And I've been practicing since I even first picked up an astrology book because I came to the planets through the plants, and I was working at a spiritual supply store and just being an herbalist there back in Memphis, Tennessee. It's not that I'm not known as an astrologer, but I'm more known for my herbal practice, my healing work, and I'm called many things there: the juju man, the witch doctor,
The juju man.
Yeah, like the crystal guy, the anything, everything, the counselor, the father, And so yeah, that's a little bit. I also have like 200 hours in Kundalini yoga.
Really?
Yeah, 2 degrees. Learning. I have like over 200 hours in like doing physical therapy internship.
And you used to be a football player, right?
Yeah, I used to play football. Yeah, I used to like help people in like training and stuff like that before I even got into all this stuff. So just like I've accumulated this wealth of information and knowledge that has definitely turned into like embodied wisdom and like helping people learn how to think, not what to think, so that they can like posture themselves correctly in the world that we live in that's lacking discernment.
Yeah, and one of the things that I really like about you too is, you're very involved in your community. But we were just talking on the car right here, like you're very involved. Like you help a lot of men out too. And something I've been talking a lot about recently on my podcast and on my channel is like men's health, men's mental health, and how astrology can play into that. And you just seem to be very active. But I'd love to know a little bit more about like your experiences with helping out other men, or what do they come to you with, and where do you guide them?
Yeah, so one big thing that I've been really working with in the last, especially like 8 months, is like working with men and like not. So there's this thing where like men aren't emotional, and like so like that's like problematic, or it's a problem to some people, and sometimes it is for sure. And so it's more about helping men be able to like acknowledge their emotions and like hold it and like let it move, but not become emasculated by it, or like become so vulnerable, like a little whiny about it, and or like going to talk therapy and being just like I'm gonna talk about my feelings. It's like very unnecessary to go that far to me.
Yes.
But it's necessary to acknowledge. I kind of thinking about like the groupthink and how people think men should be, and it's interesting because we haven't been men, and so to think that like men are problematic as like a orientation is issue because we haven't been being men
for a long time. No,
yeah.
and that's something I've been trying to get more into on this show, because it's like right now the group think is like, oh, all men are toxic masculinity, and if they just went to talk therapy, all of our problems would be solved. And it's like most men don't want to talk about their fucking feelings. Yeah. Like if anything, like I actually just did a video about this, of like most men need some type of guidance, need some type of leadership. Mm-hmm. And I mean, like I really think astrology is a great place for that. But I know that you use much more of plants and herbs and other various medicines in your practice. So I guess like when you, I'm assuming a lot more men come to you usually then, right?
Yeah.
Where do you, how do you kind of guide them, or what do you usually use? So like, let's say, because you were telling me about like if a guy has like anxiety and he's like, I don't have anxiety or whatever. Like I would
totally
dive into that a little more.
Yeah, totally. So there's this phenomenon. when I work with men, I ask them all these questions, and I have like very specific questions that I ask people. Like one of the first things I ask is like, where do you get your anxiety at? Your stomach, your heart, or your head? And a lot of men just say, I don't have anxiety, and so I've learned also not to. So language. So when I think about language, what people say, their words aren't necessarily always true, and so this is an interesting thing because people are like invalidating people's experience and stuff like that, and it's like, well, people are invalidating their experience all the time is what I've actually come to realize. And so I can ask a man like, where do you get your anxiety at? They won't know, and I can check their pulse, and then I can check their tongue, and then their body says differently. And so that's where I always start, and I say, do you ever get a tight feeling in your chest? They're like, yeah, I get that. And then I'm like, well, that's anxiety. Or I'm like, do you have digestive issues, or do you get bloated? They're like, yeah. And I'm like, well, that's too much air element in the stomach. The air element corresponds to the lungs and the breath and how you're breathing in your nervous system. And so you probably have anxiety there too as well. And then I just like how people hold themselves in space. I can like see kind of what's going on. So I'll ask a line of questions that gives me validation to them. So I make it very logical because a lot of men like that kind of thing. And
well, that was one thing I wanted to ask too, is because like where a lot of men are going to be closed off to this stuff, even if they're open to receiving it, which is really funny. I get that a lot in my practice. But like, how do you navigate that? Especially too, because I feel like a lot of working with men is like, it's not necessarily leading a horse to water, but it's kind of like, how do you guide them through that experience into where they're more, because what I've learned too is most men want to control the situation, and they want to make it their decision. They don't want to be told what to do. So like, how do you navigate that?
Yeah. So, so I have a Gemini moon, right? And so like I have a trickster kind of energy to me. And so really what I do is I modulate the male ego essentially. And so what I do usually is like say something that might be like a little like talking shit, or maybe potentially even like a little degrading a bit, because it like hits them. Mm-hmm. And once it hits them, they can feel now. And once I do that, I have them.
Yeah, that's something too I've figured with men, because it's like once you break the ice and you can kind of like joke about it, and you kind of like, well, I mean, I kind of do the same thing, but no, I totally feel you. Well, so so in the car right here, you were telling me about what's the lecture that you're doing? Something about, I can't remember the word that you used, but I wanted you to wait until I got a microphone in front of your face to talk about this. But what was the one lecture that you were doing?
Yeah, so the first lecture that I did on Friday was called Saturn and Fascia.
Fascia,
yeah,
okay.
Fascia, yeah.
So explain that a little bit.
Yeah, so fascia, I mean, we call it like a new organ system, even though we've known about it for maybe like 30 years at minimum. But I think people talked about it long ago, but it wasn't a thing. And so fascia is just like these layers of connective tissue within the body that is the structure of our body. And so a lot of times when we think about Saturn from an old medical astrology perspective, not to say that it's incorrect, but you think about bones, tendons, ligaments, and stuff like that, skin as well. Mm-hmm. But our bones actually, they're not holding us together at all. They're actually just floating in space. And they're floating in space because it's wrapped up by the fascia. And that's actually what's holding us up. That's actually the structure of our body. And the fascia has these layers, right? And thinking about like Saturn's rings. And so like around your muscle, there is a layer of fascia. Around your muscle fibers, there's a layer of fascia. Around your muscle cells, there's a layer of fascia. And so it's just, I've just been corresponding Saturn with fascia. And there's more than 3 layers of fascia for sure. But the 3 that we talk about with fascia is the superficial layer, where it's just like right underneath the skin. So the hypodermis essentially is fascia. And that's how I also like when we think about skin and Saturn, it's really fascia that I've noticed, because even when people have issues with their fascia, they'll end up having like skin issues and stuff like that. And then there's another layer that's called the deep layer, and that's the one that like sounds way more Saturnian. Like it's more fibrous, it's more tense, and it's like also where our physical trauma is stored when we have bruises that go deep enough. It's in there. And there's also something called visceral fascia. And that's like the things that like is protecting our organs, And so even thinking about that from a perspective of Saturn, and I work with evolutionary astrology too. So thinking about that, how that reflects in psyche or consciousness, is that on the layer, like you can pinch and roll, and like it's not your skin that's actually rolling, it's actually the fascia underneath it that's like having it rolling. And I think about Saturn and conditioning, and like shoulds and supposed tos, and how like at Esau I should act this way. At Whole Foods I should act this way. In church I should act this way. And I act differently, and it's like easy for me to move back and forth with that. Like the deep fascia would have more correspondence having to do with like your mental conditioning that comes from like a more like parental level, or like your societal norms that you were injected with when you were younger. And that is kind of like fibrous. It's like kind of more tense. It's like it's more crystallized. And then the visceral fascia having to do with protecting your guts. And so it's like, well, what is the guts of your life? And like, what is your real work in the world? And like, that must be protected. And so I was talking about that in fascia. And,
well, so how do you apply that in terms of like, are you looking at people's natal Saturns and only looking at like their natal placement, or would like Saturn's transits like differentiate that at all, or would like a hard aspect from Saturn to natal Saturn like manifest as like skin issues or something like that? Like, how do you? Do you, I guess are you doing anything along those lines?
Indeed, yes, I am. And so, as far as transits and progressions and annual perfections and stuff like that, I am still working with that to like develop it more and like notice what's really going on, because I'm really about a trial and error process. And so I learn in an embodied way, so that if somebody's like mentally, they're like, well, this isn't that, this idea that I have, and I'm like, this is my 7th year doing this. And so like I don't like to play in the world of thought too much like that. I like to like actually have a grounded, concrete experience of things. And so the example that I gave in my lecture was I used the Sagittarius rising because I had a client earlier that day who had Sagittarius rising. And so with fascia as well, it's so there's these things called fascial lines, and it like basically like goes up your whole body, or it goes like around your body. And so the shins, there's a fascial line called the superficial fascial line, I'm pretty sure, or the front fascial line. I forget the name of it. So it comes from the front of your feet right here, and then it goes up your shins, and then it goes to your thighs, and then it goes up here into the front of your body, and then it goes to your neck. And
so it kind of like follows the what's that artery? The your coronary artery or something like that. The main artery that I know goes through like your leg up to your neck.
I don't know if it follows it directly, but what I can say is that in Islamic astrology specifically too, like the shins is ruled more by Capricorn than it is Aquarius, which more people say Aquarius now as far as the shins. But
what, really?
What?
I figured Capricorn would be more associated with the knees and shins, and like I've always heard Aquarius is like ankle.
Yeah. So people say that, but some people do say Aquarius rules the shins and the calves. You know, that's the area of the body. You know.
Okay.
And so I say I don't really care. I just want to figure it out over time. But like, so if we have Sagittarius rising, like so coming from the shins, this would be Capricorn, and that's like it's an aversion to Sagittarius, right?
Yeah.
And so whatever's going on with your hips is going to have something to do with your shins, and it's going to come up to your knees, and then your thighs is ruled by Sagittarius. Mm-hmm. There's another aversion that's Scorpio, and Scorpio rules like the pelvic floor, and so that fascial line goes through the pelvic floor. And there's also the in conjunction to Cancer, and that's your stomach, and then the fascial line goes through your stomach. And then there's also that in conjunction to Taurus, and that is coming up with the neck. So these in conjunctions, I'm finding that
the in conjunction, you're talking about like an aversion, right?
Aversion, yeah, totally.
And so for people that may not know this, aversion is it like how would you best describe aversion?
I would call it a blind spot, right? So like right now, if I look forward, I can't see right here, and then I can't see like there's certain blind spots with just like the way vision works is the blind spot in this direction. In this direction. That's what I would say.
And
so
and
the
like
blind spots.
And if like you're the ascendant, the 12th house is an aversion, the 2nd house is an aversion, the 8th house is an aversion, and the 6th house is an aversion, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because you can't see your hidden enemies, you can't see what your health issues are, you can't see your other people's money and shit like that.
Exactly.
Well, and so I guess you were talking about like they're an aversion. What does that correlate to in terms of like you said like if the shins are an aversion to like the thighs, are you saying like even though they're connected, you may not?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so let's say somebody has a hip issue or like they have tight quads. The person probably will try to focus on their quads and like release that, or be like, my quads are tight. I have a problem with my quads. It's like, maybe you might have a problem with your shins actually though. Or if you have tightness in your neck right here, you might want to go to your quads, or you might want to like release what's going on in your stomach. So you don't see that. You think you have a tightness in the neck and that's the problem. But it's just what's expressing the problem.
Yeah.
That's how the problem is expressing. So even it's interesting that like where you feel pain, where you experience pain, might not be where the pain is actually at. That's how you're experiencing it.
Yeah, that's just like where it's manifesting.
Right.
I learned a little bit of that because I did a small training program where I don't know how to best describe this, where they really focused on like people that were injured, and I have like my ankle's completely shattered. It's super fucked up. But what that would end up doing is like when I would squat, my knee would kind of go in, and so it ended up having to be like a whole body adjustment just to get my ankle to be more stronger for when I was lifting.
Totally, yeah. Which you should work on your feet first, always they say, and then if you have a foot issue, you have an ankle issue. You have an ankle issue, you have a shin issue, a knee issue. If you have a knee issue, you have a hip issue.
Sounds like if you got one issue, you got all the issues.
Yeah, and it starts from the bottom and then it goes up. Is usually how it works, or it's the easiest way to work with it, I find. Yeah.
So you also did a lecture about the malefics being medicinal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really curious about that because that will be a great segue into everything else that we're kind of talking about.
Yeah.
But I mean, something that we were also chit-chatting about in the car is the fact that, like, I feel like a lot of astrology right now, malefics are looked at as, I mean, for one, they're like the worst things ever, and the way to work with them is by going opposing them, which it just doesn't sound like how you it's kind of like being opposite Saturn is like opposing an authority is like the worst way to get the authority to be on your side, right? Totally. So explain. I would love a little bit more about your lecture, but also I guess the malefic part of it.
Yeah, totally. So the medicinal malefics is just about like how do we use these forces that exist in actual reality instead of having it be an idea of malefic meaning bad. And so it was even called medicinal malefics. Bad not bad meaning, it was like bad not bad meaning good or something like that, so it's like just thinking about, and we were talking when we were talking to cars, like the desert isn't bad, right? Antarctica isn't bad. And in Islamic astrology too, like I've been on I'm a Patreon now of Ali Alomi. And he was talking about how in the Islamic period they called them the unfortunates rather than the malefics. And so I think that's a better way to put it, because it's like the desert is an unfortunate place to live because it's like you see there's not a lot of things growing there. And in Antarctica there's not a lot of things growing there. But it doesn't mean bad. And so experiencing things that are extreme aren't necessarily bad or problematic. They're just something that you need to learn to understand. So,
well, that's something. It's funny you say that because lately in my client practice, usually I go over sect just to kind of give us some perspective on the malefics. But like, for example, when I have night chart clients, and it's like Saturn is like your malefic out of sect, so it's really really bad. And it's like, well, like Saturn rules like growing up and maturity, so it's not necessarily that it's bad, but I just look at it as like that is the planet that you are going to experience the most challenge with. Like taking on those qualities and doing those things are going to be much more difficult. Not that you shouldn't go about it. And I think like a lot of people just want to avoid like the bad energy, like no bad energy, no bad vibes. Everything has to be, wrapped in a soft blanket and, self-love and stuff like that. And so, I mean, do you, I guess, how do you end up using that in your practice if you're talking about like, Saturn like isn't necessarily bad, it's unfortunate. I think that's also a good way to look at it too, because that also kind of takes off the what's the word I'm looking for? Not the personal responsibility, but like the reaction to it. Because if it's just unfortunate, it's easier to not necessarily write it off, but move on from it and learn from it. Versus like this is your malefic, this is your enemy. Then it's just kind of like, well, the whole universe is out to get me.
Exactly. Yeah. So the first way I work with it is like, let's say somebody has issues with Saturn. Let's call it for now. Maybe I'll have them do something like ice baths. For like for a small amount of time, it's like that's the thing about malefics, they're extreme conditions, and so we don't want to stay in that extreme condition. Nobody takes ice baths for 50 minutes, right? And so it's like, but can you stay in like a cold shower for 2 minutes, 1 minute? How does that feel?
I've been working on cold showers personally.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, how does that feel? And like, can you, like, how does that manifest in your life when you feel like this thing happening and it's like contracting you? Can you breathe with it, be with it while you feel like something's pressing down on you and contracting you? It's like, can you be with that in your body? And if you can experience that in your body, then when you're out in the waking life, you will be able to handle and face that situation more. And then Mars would be more like the sauna. And it's like
the extreme heats.
Exactly, the extreme heat. And so how do you experience the extreme heat? And is it good for you? Is it bad for you? When do you need to get that medicine? When do you need to go out in the woods and just fucking be primal and fucking growl at somebody?
Yeah, go walk. I mean, I saw that you saw this tweet, but I was like, Uranus is in our 6th house, and I started off with Uranus being in my 6th house of like, oh, I'm going to try vegetarianism for a little bit. Now I'm like eating raw meat, sunning my balls, like drinking, like, and it's so much more. I've been getting so much more into like evolutionary biology and just, looking at life through an evolutionary sense, like given our ancestors and how, because I think what's so fun about astrology is it really roots you into like the reality of being a human being on Earth. And there's nothing new under the sun. Everything repeats. And all of these things that we're going through as a society, we've all been through before hundreds of, if not thousands of times. And it's just about like reconnecting yourself to that. But, my question is, do you as far as like, for example, like ice baths or a sauna, do you differentiate what someone might do better with depending on their Mars or their Saturn placement?
Yeah, Mars and Saturn placement, but my mind doesn't even really work that way. It just works in like, so like my Sagittarius rising would be like, this is the big picture. And then my Gemini moon's like, and this is the details that we're going to work with. And so I never use anything in isolation because that's not true. It's not real. But yes, I kind of look at that. And then with some people, especially if they get like a package program with me, if they're working with me for not usually 3 months, if they get the 6-month, 9-month, or 12-month package with me, I'll have them end up doing both, because you need to understand the experience of both, how they influence you, and how you're moving in the world. When somebody brings the heat to you, how do you experience that in your life? Go to the sauna, experience that, feel into that. How do you experience the cold? And go to the ice bath. How do you experience that? How you feel that? So now you know. So when the heat turns on, you know how, your reaction, your response to it. And so, yeah, you know how to navigate it better.
So you don't really do too much with like, let's say like temperament in a chart. Like you're mostly focused on like the planetary idea of like, if you need some Mars stuff, we're going to do some Mars stuff. If you need Saturn stuff, do some Saturn stuff. Not necessarily super dependent on its placement in the chart.
It depends on how I'm working with somebody. So if it's like a one-off reading, then I'll give them what is needed. And if I'm working with somebody long-term, I help them understand reality. And so you're gonna, you're gonna experience both most likely, so that you can know how to interface with it and like know that if you experience the sauna poorly, then it's like, why are you putting those extra jalapenos on your burrito? That doesn't really make sense, And if you experience cold negatively, why are you eating salad so much when it's like the salad is a cold food? Or like, why are you having yogurt at night when your digestion is poor and slow? That doesn't make sense. And so that lands. People get that now. And then it also removes the value judgment of should do this, shouldn't do that. And you actually understand the quality of what's happening in your life and in your body, and how you're in relationship with the summer and the winter and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's been the most powerful thing for me is like, for example, like I was doing strict carnivore for a minute, and now I'm having a little bit more fun with what I'm doing. I'm kind of off the rails, but like something I'm looking forward to this Capricorn season is like just meat and bones. Like I want to eat a lot of bone marrow during Capricorn season, just to like, get into the spirit of the energy. But so, something that is going on a lot right now is more and more people are getting focused on their health, and we're going to talk about that with Pluto and Aquarius. But I'm more curious of like, who are the people that are coming to you? Because like I'm having, as far as clientele, I mean, back in 2019, 2018, it was, I say this lightly as a joke, but it was mostly like white women that wanted to leave their husbands. Yeah. And it's like spiritual women, right? Versus now, and I don't know if this is just, me growing as an astrologer or just, who's into astrology, but I have so many different walks of life. Yeah. I mean, I got plumbers, lawyers, doctors, nurses, so many nurses, totally. And they're coming for all types of reasons, but who's coming to you for this health stuff? And where do you really see your, like, do you see your work being important, but it's more of like, do you see your work being more and more important? Because I also think too, with this Pluto and Aquarius stuff, health is only going to be more and more of a big thing. So I'd just love you to dive a little more into that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And my work has become more prevalent, relevant is like how I would put it. And when I first started practicing, it was 90% black women, because I was living in Memphis, Tennessee, and working at a spiritual supply store. Those are people who were coming in and inviting me to share with them. As over time, as I like expanded beyond just my local environment, it was spiritual white women, I would say. Now it's a larger variety. And I also started something with this company, Astrology Hub. We have a platform called Astrologers Connect. And so when people go on that platform, they can like reach astrologers directly, kind of like you could call it like maybe like a hotline kind of thing.
Okay. I didn't
know that. And so since I've been working with them, we've been doing some beta testing with that, and it's been the variety is growing with that, but mostly Memphis, Tennessee, still mostly black women. Now I started to have some men that I'm working with, especially now that people are starting to know that I help like 5 businesses open up in Memphis, Tennessee through electional astrology.
Nice.
And so it's more like concrete based things that
Yeah.
I've been working with since I started learning at the School of Oraculous with Michael A. Bryan. So the range is it's a good range, and a lot of people that I work with, they'll come to me for a health issue, and then we end up talking about what happened with their mom and their dad. Or people come to me for because I work with Evolutionary Astrology. What is my soul? And I'm like, you're not drinking enough water. You know, it's like, so I like that range is like ridiculous in my practice, but also in the way that that's manifesting in the variety of people that I'm working with too.
Well, yeah, that was one of my next questions is how often are people coming to you for like health stuff that ends up turning into like, I don't want to say just like natal chart stuff, but deeper life stuff versus the opposite. Who's coming to you for just a birth chart reading that you end up being like, you know, we need to be getting you on some herbs or doing this practice or whatever. How often is that like happening?
Yeah. So, I'll say it. So really what happens is I have all these offerings on my website, and all my offerings are the same thing, really, in truth, because
I just switched it out. Like pretty much when people buy a natal chart reading, I'm like, this is actually going to be not that, but kind of that at the same time, because it's all one and the same.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like I show up, they show up, and then life unfolds, right? And so being there with the person is the first thing that I do. And so sometimes that looks like they are talking about their career, but then it ends up being about their relationship, or they're talking about their anxiety in the world, and it ends up being really about just like what happened to them when they were younger, and how like this year is just 8th house year, and you're like needing to like die to who you thought you were, and so those things just come up organically in general. So it depends is the answer. Yeah, it depends how it unfolds.
That's something I think that's like really fun about astrology is it's always going to be like, you know, people come to, I was just talking to Wade about this. It's like, you know, in a horary, someone might ask you a question, but then you look at the horary chart and it's like, that's actually going to be something a little bit more than what they're asking on the surface. But so a big reason I wanted to have you on today was like, you're really into, I don't want to say you're really into health stuff. Clearly that's your area of expertise, but and I was just telling you about this in the car. For a while, there was this explosion of astrologers, and there was a minute where I was kind of like, I don't want to just say jaded, but I was just kind of like, there's a lot of people in this versus the more I've been talking to people and the more that I've like really been getting clientele, and it's not just about the number, but the situations that are coming up. It's like, wow, we really do need more astrologers and healers and all of this stuff. And I think we're both in agreement that Pluto going into Aquarius is going to be a radical shift in how we handle, medicine and how we handle doctors. And I'm kind of curious as far as like where, like as from astrologer to astrologer, how do you feel like on your path with that? Because, you know, I used to kind of look at, you know, myself as being an astrologer and not necessarily know what to think of it. And this might sound, you know, to some might sound a little bit more egotistical, but like, I really feel like people are being called to this path right now for a reason. Like there's so much sickness and disease and problems in this earth, and it just feels like, you know, so many people are being called to aspire to what their purpose is, and a lot of that is healing at the end of the day. Like especially when so many people are sick and disease ridden and everything like that. But have you felt, you know, where do you feel like you're in your purpose with that, and do you feel I guess what I'm trying to get to here is, in terms of you being alive here on this earth and the work that you do and the time frame that is coming up here in the future, how do you put all of that together? Are you looking at this as like, yeah, we are in a time where we do need to be, you know, helping more people and healing more people, and are you taking that in stride? Or I guess what are your opinions on that?
Yeah, totally. So I'm a student of the plants a lot, you know, and so like they always have just been showing me like what's going on in the world and in society, and so wherever there's sickness, there's going to need to be healing, and so then there's going to be more healers needed in general. And for my first orientation to like Pluto and Aquarius was, I was hearing Jeffrey Wolf Green talk about it, and he was talking about how more humans will start becoming sterile. You know, Aquarius is a very sterile sign in general, as a generalization, of course, and so people are going to be becoming sterile, so that means health is going to be a problem. Reproductive health is just like our ability to create or lack thereof. And so when people are having the lack of ability to create, then that also means they're going to have the lack of ability to heal. And so my work has been learning how to help people cultivate health beyond danger and learn how to be adaptable.
What do you mean health beyond danger?
So in Taoist herbalism, they say the measure of health is the measure of adaptability. You know, adaptability is your measure of health. And so we're not able to adapt in this world right now because we want to be coddled, because we reflex from lack of understandings, because how things are going on in our society and how they're so distorted. So people are like there's a distortion in our reality, and then people are like anti that, or they're like, oh no, I'm not going to do that, I'm gonna be over here. And it's like, well, you're still using the problem or the issue as the center point. And so if you create a reflex to a distortion, you're still distorted. And so that is illness.
It's I mean, it's kind of like, you could really say this about anything going on right now, but so much of society is attacking the symptom and not the root of the issue.
Totally, yeah. And so the root of the issue to me is just like a lack of understanding of the basis of what is reality, what is life itself, you know. I was having a conversation with one of my friends yesterday, and she was talking about how she's having issues with like social interactions and stuff like that. And she was like, and people will try to make it about me, and it's like, it's not about me, it's a social problem, it's not a me problem. And I'm like, and she was talking about how she goes on these long walks, and I'm like, what are you doing on these long walks? And she's like, listening to music and just walking. And I'm like, well, where's your social interaction there? You're not putting your hands in the earth. You don't even feed your microbiome, which is your community, and being social. And it's like, so like, I might have said this the last time, but at the shop that I work at, I used to talk to people, and I'll be like, people have 401ks but don't know how to shit properly. Right. And like, and
that's I don't even get me started on the poop stuff with the South Node and the Scorpio right now.
Yeah, totally. So things like that, you know, simple things like that. It's like when we're babies, the first thing we do, maybe not the first thing we do, but like one of the first things we do is learn how to crawl. And older people have a tendency towards like being like, I'm not gonna get on the floor because then I won't be able to get back up. And I'm like, wow, you've lived your whole life, you think you're complex, you've had this job, you're giving all this perceived wisdom to younger people, and you don't even know how to crawl. But that's one of the fundamentals of our life. Wow. And we think all these things are complex. Then people use this word nuance. Oh, there's nuance to it. And it's like, they're actually right, there is nuance, but it's like, but you didn't even drink water this morning.
Yeah, they don't even invoke it. Well, like the same people that are like, oh, I love nuanced conversations, are the same people that are like very like only looking at things through this like, you know, like really the Saturn and Aquarius way, which is very like, it's this one fixed idea, and there's that fixed idea, and it's just these two sides, and that's kind of it, rather than like exploring it for what it can be and for what it is. But that's a really good point. I know so many old people that like my mom's like this. I'm really like, she's a fairly healthy person, but I want her to work like more on her muscle strength, so she's not like, you know, she's got arthritis, and you know, our whole family's got like dementia and Alzheimer's and all that shit. So I really want her to work on her health, but she's so like, oh, I'm healthy because of this and this and that, but like I couldn't like, she wouldn't be able to get on the floor and crawl or or anything like that. And I think that's something too that I see a lot of people in their second Saturn returns go through is like, yeah, you're the old person now, and you need to be teaching stuff. And like, what do you even have to teach? What do you have to offer? Are you even giving that kind of, you know, wisdom there?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And you know, our society lacks initiation.
Don't even get me. I don't want to say wrong camera. There we go. I don't go ahead.
We just lack initiation. So it's like, how are you in relationship with Earth? How are you in relationship with community? We're not really taught that. We're taught to like, especially as children, we're taught to like, not be seen, not be heard, and not be in connection in a certain type of way. Or like, even though you like hate your uncle, make sure you still go hug him because you're supposed to do that. And so when we get all these supposed to's out, like in my talks this weekend, I've been saying like, stop letting people shit on you. You know, people are just shitting on each other all the time. Wow. And so not being initiated in our society is just like it's a really big problem, because we don't know how to orient ourselves in space and time.
Well, and that's something too that I've been thinking more so about is I really look at myself. I'm the elder Gen Z. I'm still very young, but something that I have, and this is why I get like really frustrated around like old people and just, you know, current politics, is a lot of these older generations have taken out the rite of passage for a lot of people. Like, there are people that are 80 years old that should be long gone that are running things where there's 30-year-old men, 40-year-old men that it is their right to have that rite of passage to be in those type of positions. But I don't know what it really is about society right now that I don't want to say cripples that, but like hinders that experience. Like, it's kind of like, you know, millennials are dealing with this when you see all the memes of like, you know, people in the 1920s, you know, lost all their savings and lost their house to the economy crashing. And then it's like, I never had any of those, and I'm like a millennial or whatever. And so, you know, I guess what are your thoughts about how do you, because this is something too that I've been trying to at least come to people with, is like initiating that process on your own, because a lot of times I feel like in society you have to be told like, hey, you're allowed to do this, versus like, no, you make it okay to do that.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. So the first thing I would do is go all the way back to the beginning of like, when was the last time you actually had to like be outside and survive, you know? Because like that's primal and it's like very, it's foundational. So if you don't know how to do that, then you might get anxiety because your partner is about to potentially break up with you, and it's like you're not being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. You like, we don't feel a sense of safety because we've never even been out up in a place where we actually have our survival needs being threatened. So we've like created these phantoms in our,
like
in
words
our
are
world.
violence.
Yeah, words are violent. And some people, you know, it's like, yeah. So with that, too, even thinking about like words are violence, it's like, that's so valid, and it's also not even true a lot of times, you know? And so like that's something that I've like trying to bring people into. It's like these things that are valid also are like not real and not true sometimes too. So validity doesn't even, like, it doesn't matter, you know? It is.
Yeah, validity doesn't necessarily mean truth, or
Right,
necessarily
exactly.
mean like the honest situation. No, because I mean, I partially agree in the idea that like, yes, words can be harmful, but when you really like invoke like that word violence, and I'm glad that you brought up like the hunting by a saber tooth, because something I've been thinking a lot about getting into this carnivore and primal stuff is like, I used to be kind of against hunting because I just didn't like the idea of killing animals, versus now I'm like, I as a man need to go and hunt my food. Like that is a experience that all of my other ancestors for literally hundreds of thousands of years got to experience that I haven't gotten to experience. And being able to like go and again be outside, wake up before dawn, go, and that whole thing just would completely, I mean, not, I look at it as both like a healing thing, but like it can completely change your perspective on how you work with the environment. Like something that, you know, I talk a lot of shit on vegans in my podcast or whatever. And I don't mean offense to anybody, but well, and a lot of the vegan ideology is like, we are like not a part of the ecosystem with animals, when reality we actually are. Like we are, you know, we're all connected in this way where like, you know, we're supposed to be eating animals, we're supposed to be taking care of them, we're supposed to be taking care of the land and all of that stuff. And I'm just kind of going off on a tidbit right now, but I guess to get back to, because I want to talk a little bit more about Pluto and Aquarius and what your thoughts really are about it, and how are you specifically going to navigate, you know, these next 20 years? Because something I really think is going on is, I did an episode on my podcast about Pluto and Aquarius and like all of like the technocracy, biomedical state shit, but I also really feel as if there is going to be a big movement of people going like into these kind of routes of like astrology, herbs, and that kind of medicine to do their own healing work. And I guess, where do you see the future of that going? Do you see a future in it? Or because some people also think that astrology is going to die off sometime soon, or do you think this stuff is going to rise and become more popular and more of a tool for healing in communities?
Yeah. So I mean, it's already risen up. So even if it quote unquote dies away, it's like, it's going to still be like a fixture in like the reality moving forward. And so when I think about Pluto and Aquarius, the first thing I think about is like the relationship with technology and like our electromagnetic field and our nervous system, and how I'm going to be moving forward and helping people learn how to like carry that energy. It's like if my electromagnetic field is like this big and this strong, like when technology influences me, it's influencing me from right here. But if my nervous system is shaky and I'm like frail about things, then technology is actually like flooding me, dysregulating me. Again, going back to like making me feel sterile, and also causing like some subtle, maybe I'll use the word trauma, but maybe I shouldn't use the word trauma. But it's like, it's creating issues, you know, issues with our bodies and with our minds, and sometimes it like really wreaks havoc on people. And so really, I'm just thinking about transmuting people's electromagnetic field in their nervous system and being able to tap into things beyond the current space and time, so they can like, find themselves some type of center. That's beyond astrology to me, but it's a part of when Pluto goes in Aquarius that I'm going to start really tuning into that.
Are you into EMFs at all?
Yeah, totally.
Oh yeah. What do you think about like the 5G stuff? Because I just remember like 2019 when like all of the, like the pandemic was going on. Everyone's like, wait until the 5G turns on, and I kind of dismissed it. I really did. now that I'm getting into this, I have this iPhone 13 I got as a content phone, and I swear to God, it hurts my balls. Like I could literally feel it.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, and I mean, also too, all over the place here in Denver. I actually saw a couple articles, people talking about this. They have all these 5G towers, and I'm just reading about how it affects testosterone, how it affects hormones, and these are like proven studies. This isn't like bullshit science, and it blows my mind that people are more worried about like carbon in the air, but they're like, yes, let's pollute the environment with like EMFs and everything. I guess, are you like, I've been focusing on, I don't want to say focusing, but I've been doing my best to like downgrade tech or like go like older kind of tech. Are you into any of that kind of stuff at all, or do you find yourself doing anything with your electronics to help your health?
Yeah, I just keep them away from me as much as I can, but really I focus on like being centered in myself and building my nervous system, because if I'm at level 10 and EMF affects me at let's say like a 2, then when that affects me I'm at an 8.
So you're pretty much talking about like putting up like a shield almost.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, because my nervous system is going to be strong enough to withstand it, because that's giving off electromagnetic field. I have an electromagnetic field. Who's gonna dom on what?
That's a really.
I'm out here dominating streets,
dude. That's such a well. That's it's so. I've been talking about this in my horoscopes of like, I've really been looking at life through a straight up like physics sense, where everything is energy. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transmuted. And so I've been really like, when I get negative energy, how am I, not only because, this goes into the health thing of like storing negative energy. When you don't let it out, that turns into disease and all these other issues. But like, how am I transmuting it? And I never even thought about that as like, rather than being like, I guess on the defense of it, of like, oh, I got to protect myself, versus like, how do I just like, not even make it a problem. It seems much more of an offensive position.
Yeah, totally. And I always go with the both and so also I accumulate knowledge about it and how to protect myself against it in that way, but I focus more on like my center and then go out from there. And so also with that, okay, cool. So they're saying like, basically they're telling me to do this thing where like when people think about protection, especially in like, let's say the new age or like spiritual people, when they think about protection, they think about create a bubble around yourself. And so that's not what we do. What we do is we go into our belly button, our navel, and we close our eyes, and then we just imagine like a ball of light there, and we fill that up. We become full of ourself, and then we continue to do that daily until that bubble becomes a field, and that field is what is protecting us. And so I'm feeling like everything's fine and I'm safe for my center, rather than looking for safety outside of myself. And that's kind of how I like orient towards it in general. And I work with people to understand that.
That's I really like that framework of looking at things. Sorry, I'm a little like just thinking about it now. Mm-hmm. 2 Sag risings, I can't like have a conversation without like thinking about it deeply. Now I have a lot more to think about with that.
I feel that. Yeah.
Well, because I also want to talk to you about house systems, but that's a completely different conversation, and I kind of want to keep going on this because, it just seems like in this world, more and more things are, I don't want to say out to get you, but it's like, there was a while where you can, maybe I'm just making this up as far as like, there just seems to be so many outside influences that can literally be affecting like your nervous system and your body, to where it's like, it's almost as if you have to be healthy and you have to be doing these things just to survive, or not even just survive, but to actually thrive. Yeah. You have to be doing this kind of stuff. And that's such a I'm really blown away by the difference of like being in a bubble versus just creating a field. Like that is a huge like cognitive difference when it comes to understanding. Because when people and this goes into the conversation of what we were talking about with the malefics. Like so many people like I love talking shit on this, but it's like whenever there's eclipses, everyone's like, stay at home, read a book, love yourself, and it's like, no, this is the eclipse energy. Like fucking go crazy with it. Go and do it. Like and so. I think that a lot of the ways that we're, gosh, now I'm just kind of almost lost in thought with that, because it's just society is always telling us to, be on the defense of that, versus like that is such an where's your Mars? That's such an offensive way of going.
Mars is conjunct the ascendant in Capricorn.
That's what I thought. You've got Mars and Saturn in Capricorn, Sun and Jupiter in Cancer. No, you're not Sun in Cancer.
Yeah, Jupiter in Cancer. Opposing that Mars, and then I have the Sun in Aquarius conjunct the North Node.
Oh, you're in Aquarius?
Yeah. I had
Fuck.
6 planets in Capricorn though. So
Yeah,
it's like,
that's why I was like, I do not.
Yeah.
The sun's like also. I don't even feel that from you. That's so funny. Okay, so that can kind of segue us into the houses because you had made a post that, and I just talked to Wade about this where we got to go really into the houses. But you use periphery houses, right?
sometimes now. Jen Zart talked about like what they call it, like open house system. That was the house system they said they use.
Open
and so
house
really,
system,
yeah. So what it
that's
really
funny.
means is like when I'm at the School of Oraculos studying horary, I use Regimontanus. When I'm doing evolutionary astrology, I use Porphyry. When I'm doing annual perfections, for now, I use whole sign houses. When I do medical astrology, I start with whole sign houses. And so I have a Gemini moon. And so this is also anybody listening right now, know yourself, know where your Mercury's at. And so you can use one house system or you can use a variety depending on how you're oriented to life. Don't fuck yourself up by trying to just hear what I'm saying. Anyway, so yeah. So I use open house systems. So I use a variety. I use Alcabitius too, especially when I'm using
Really?
the triplicity. Yeah, when I use the triplicity lords of every house.
Why do you use that system for the?
Because
triplicity
that's where I learned that from Jen Zart. And so
Oh.
since I use open house systems, it's like I was given that information from this house system, and so that's how I use it. And then I take all these things and I like move them into the other house system to see if a difference is made. And if a difference isn't made, then I kind of just move more towards Porphyry, Regimontanus, or whole sign in general.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Jen Zart because I'm having her on here later today, and so and featuring all of you guys together with like a flowing conversation is great. But well, you had made a post on Instagram that I really liked, and you were like, well, it was like, oh, Porphyry was good enough for the ancients, so it's good enough for me, or something like that. And I'm really curious about that take because I use Regimontanus for horary, but right now in my natal consultations, I'm primarily using whole sign houses. But
Yeah,
I
sure.
also told Wade like I identify as I'm not in a committed relationship with any house system because it's such an
Yeah.
arbitrary thing. But I don't know many astrologers that are very like I use periphery, so I'm very curious about what are the things that you like about it and its use cases. And you said you use it for evolutionary astrology.
Yeah, totally. And so Mark Jones, I was learning with Mark Jones and evolutionary astrology in general. So that's the house system that they use. And so I noticed that it's not that big of a differentiation between that and Placidus. Because when I first came in, it was just Placidus because that was the default. And so I was riding the wave with that. And yeah, Porphyry, it just works in general. And then I also have like, when I started learning stuff about horary and saw Regimontanus, I would go back to Porphyry when I would use it. And I would just be like, Porphyry's always making it, it's like, it just works, you know? And I don't know, something about like I read something about Porphyry too, the person, you know. And when I was reading how he was explaining it, and I totally forget now, because it feels like useless information to me, and I just drop it because there's so many other things to know. It landed in my body, specifically like in the area of my heart, and then it was like kind of like underneath my sternum and my like kind of solar plexus. So it felt like, okay, that's where I'm gonna go. Like my will is directly connected to this house system in some weird way that doesn't make sense to me, and I don't care to try to like make it mental. So
That's the most sad rising moon in Gemini take on that. I love that a lot. Well, so explain a little bit about evolutionary astrology because my audience is very like diverse, but I don't think like I would love to hear your definition of evolutionary astrology and what that means for you and like your practice because I just know a lot of people everyone has their own different thoughts and opinions about
yeah, totally. So the primary version of evolutionary astrology I work with is from Jeffrey Wolf Green, but there's also like Stephen Forrest, there's a guy Tom Jacobs, there's like so many people who practice what's called evolutionary astrology at the moment in time. And essentially what it is just like tracking the soul's evolution through lives. And so we start with Pluto because yeah.
that's something me and Chris are joking about. I'm like, it's Pluto's the soul. Pluto is the soul.
Yeah. And so we even say like Pluto might not be the soul, but it's why the soul came back. And so when we think about the glyph of Pluto, it's the circle of spirit, and then it has the symbol of the crescent of soul, the symbol of receptivity, and then the cross of matter. And so why literally consciousness, the spirit, was like pulled back down into the reality. And so that's, you know, from my perspective, that's why I would call it soul. And I don't even care to call it soul, but I use the word soul because the
same thing like karma. Like you just use the word, like I use the word karma just because it's the idea that makes sense versus like, well, if you want to get into the nuance about it, it's a whole different story. But
Exactly. Yeah. And so, and it's the way Mark Jones talks about it, he says it's the deepest emotional and psychological attachment that one has. And so that's why it like pulled you back into this reality because you had more to do. So that's the basis of it right there. They start with Pluto. And so we're starting with people's deepest emotional and psychological attachment as like the orientation. And then I go to the nodes, and that has to do with like someone's identity or a version of identity, their emotional identity. And so the South Node, people see it as the past a lot of times, and then they see the North Node as like the future. But that's not real to me. It's just like how you were emotionally developed coming into the life, and then like how you project out your identity moving forward into the future. And so that also has to be connected with the moon. People forget about the moon, you know? It's like they're the nodes of the moon. And so the perceived past, being the South Node, is, and in the present moment of how I feel right now, my emotional identity, how I'm experiencing things right now, and then the perceived future as the North Node. And those things aren't past, present, future. They're like in this dynamic tension in every present moment. So whatever happened to me when I was younger, how my identity was formed, I feel emotionally safe or insecure in this present moment, moon. And then moving forward, I get scattered out, or I like desire so many things, right? That like more like the Jyotish Rahu kind of thing. And that's how I'm moving towards the future in the present moment. All these things are present moment things. So it's not some arbitrary past or arbitrary future. They're all happening in the now.
How do you navigate people with their North Node and their South Node? Because if that, going with that idea that the South Node is like kind of like not the past, but I get what you mean. But like, how do you have people navigate their North Node even along with their moon?
Yeah. So the first thing I'm gonna say, it depends, of course. And so like if you have squares to the node, sometimes it's essentially expressing that somebody has already been working with their North Node in their past lives. So that's a whole different thing. So I'll use just more basics. Moving forward, I talk to people and I see like how they're projecting out their emotional insecurities moving forward in their life.
And you look at that as Rahu doing that, the North Node.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The North Node does that because that's what you're hungry for, because you don't feel satiated. Stomach, moon. It's like if you're feeling like your stomach's still empty, you're going to be trying to get more, right? Or you're like, safety, safety, safety. I'm looking for it. And so it's just like I talk to a person and I see like how they're projecting their insecurities moving forward into the future and how that scatters them. Like the North Node scatters.
Wow.
And then we work with it from that perspective. And then I also, I'll say that.
Well, do you use, because I'm thinking about this with my chart in our conversation in the car, because I have the North Node in Libra on Chiron in the 11th house, or 11th house whole sign, and my moon's in Libra there too. So I could really resonate a lot with that. But so if someone's being too scattered out with their North Node, do you like recommend them to like come back to the South Node, or is that also an area that's not, because we were just talking about too, like that's going to make you feel more safe, that's going to make you feel secure, or do you like tell people to not navigate? Like how do you just tell people to navigate that versus like if this is an extreme this way and this is an extreme this way?
Yeah. So I'll just go back to the body. And so like you have your mouth, you have your anus, you have your stomach. And so if you're always trying to consume stuff, it's like, why aren't you feeling satiated in your stomach? And so the first very practical thing that I do, especially because all these things I like, they're synthesized with my medical astrology practice as well. It's like when you sit down and eat your food, do you know when you've eaten enough?
Yeah, well, that's something I've got really into, and I've been talking about this too. Of like, you know, like I hate the term right now. It's intuitive eating. It's like when your intuition is overridden with seed oils and sugars. I'm like, your hormones are out of fucking whack, and so it's one of those things of like, and this is what I liked about the carnivore diet, because it's mostly meat and fat, and you learn what satiation is versus being full. And like the way that I was raised on standard American diet type shit, like I ate till I was full because that's what my idea was of it, versus the difference of being full and fed versus like satiated and fine. And that was, I mean, a night and day difference with even my spiritual journey of just kind of like, wow, this is what it's like to be inside of my body, and not necessarily, because I feel, I don't want to say not inside my body when I'm like full or like full of carbs and a bunch of processed stuff, but yeah, that idea of what is satiation, I think is so incredibly important. You said something a minute ago that I wanted to ask more about, because I know my listeners will want to know. You brought up past lives. What is your opinion on past lives? How do you work with it, especially related to the chart? Because that's a question I get asked a lot, and I don't look at myself as that astrologer for those type of questions.
Yeah, totally. So one thing that I like emphasize strongly is that it doesn't even matter if you've ever even had a fucking past life, because the South Node if the South Node is representing what the past life would be offering or showing, then when you come into this life, you'll experience that as a child. So, you know, so it's just like back in the day, right? It's like back in the day can be when you were 2 years old, 1 year old, when you were in your mother's womb, back when you were Alejandro in Brazil in 1852. You know, it's like those things to me don't fucking matter at all. That's how I'm oriented towards it. But some people like that, you know, and that's great. And I do know that they exist for myself.
Yeah, like
So-
I totally believe in past lives. I've had my own experience with them. I just don't necessarily feel always comfortable applying it to the chart and know. I don't have an evolutionary background is probably one big part of it. But do you? How do you work with that with people in terms of their chart, or do they like maybe hold on to their idea and their concept of what a past life is, and does that distort your their ability to navigate it better?
Right. So that would just be the South Node, and so like that's going to have to do with like when it happens to them when they were younger, and so I draw them back into the present moment. So it's like if somebody's like attached to this idea, I was this person in my past life, and blah blah blah, and I say, how was your relationship with your mom and your dad, and like how'd that show up for you, and when you were younger, and then so they get a little closer now, and then we talk about that, and then I talk about how are you orienting yourself right now in this present moment. And how can we use that so that you can feel emotionally more emotionally comfortable and accept the things that have happened to you in this life so that you can reach beyond that to the past life and integrate that in the present moment. That's what it's really about for me. If it's not oriented towards bringing things back in an integrated way in the present moment and like learning how to work with, the nodes and the moon is like, to me, I consider that the circumambulation of life, which is like the Ouroboros, it like keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. It's like, so the past life is right now, and the past life is in 3 minutes, and the past life is blah, blah, blah. And so it's like, that's how I orient towards it. And then I talk to everybody different about it based off of how they're bringing it to me, because all those things are valid. And I don't care about any of those things enough to like clutch on too tight to them.
Yeah, and a lot of people clutch on more to their story than they do like than the knowledge that they want to learn. And so something I'm getting out of this conversation, it seems like you're really rooted in a specific way of going about your practice, whether it's through, herbs, whether it's through the body or even the past life stuff. It's like you always bring it to the present moment.
Yeah.
And how did you figure that out? Because that's something where like I'm starting to there's a point where you get it, but then there's a point where you understand it, right? And I'm finally starting to get to that point where I understand it, but like you're still very young. What did you go through in life to get you to the moment where it's like, no, I need to be focused on here in the moment? Was that like, did you have to go through like pain? Like as a football player, I'm assuming you experienced a lot of pain, but like how did you get to this, this knowing?
Yeah, I mean, I just fucked up a lot. And so like now I'm just like, I know what doesn't work in a lot of different ways, Also, the plants have taught me pretty much everything I know as far as like how to orient myself in the reality. And I've had my psyche pretty much ripped off of me so many times that it's just like, to be humble or cocky is a joke to me. And to take myself too seriously or think that I know what's happening in life is just like, yeah, I think I know, and also like I know I don't know, and it's whatever, It's like
I struggle with that a lot because a lot of people come to me and they're like, "Oh, you know so much," and as a Leo, I'm like, "Yeah," like in the back of my head, I'm like, "Oh, that's great," but I'm also like, I don't know a fucking thing. Like I'm only like 26, and I'm just figuring it out. I just so happen to have a camera and get to talk about it, but I think that kind of experience of realizing, no, you don't really know everything, but at the same time, being able to acknowledge what you do know and being able to say like, no, this is something I know for a fucking fact is. Yeah. I find something I really like about your way of viewing things is you're really grounded in like balance. Like it has to be brought to this present moment, and that's something that I don't see not all astrologers or spiritual practitioners are like be rooted in, because that's really fucking hard. That takes like hard life experiences to know it, exactly. To practice it. You know what I mean? Exactly. There's one thing to say it, but to actually like you're so like I really commend and respect the way that you've been able to. Ground yourself in that in your practice in all ways. Like that's really something.
Yeah, and it's like underneath the surface, it's like I get called an astrologer, I get called an herbalist, I get called a bunch of things, but the healing energy, grace from Great Spirit, God, whatever one wants to call it, it's like that streams through me, and so like I just am a representative of it, and so that's why I see it like so different as like a lot of astrologers do this or that, and I'm like, well, yeah, they're astrologers, and I guess I'm an astrologer for sure, yeah, but I'm not an astrologer. I'm something
you're
more
not
than
just
yourself.
an astrologer.
Right.
Astrology is just a tool for what it is your purpose is.
Right, and for what flows through me, and so that's what grounds me in the present moment. And also, talking to so many people, like working in an herb shop, I just have seen so many people who had it figured out, and they're like 50, and now they don't know shit, and it's like. Yeah. So it took me all the way back to the very beginning of just like, like what are we really doing here? And so I have to be here to know what we're doing here. Yeah, so that's pretty much how it goes. And again, like I said, like I've had my psyche ripped off of me in a way that I like probably won't share right now, but maybe that would be like another podcast or
Yeah, we'll have to do a Deep Pluto podcast one day.
oh my god, I will share that then. Yeah, I will share that then. Yeah, totally.
Well, so I'm trying to extrapolate as much information and knowledge from you as in the short amount of time that I have you with. So something I don't talk about medical astrology at all in my on my show or on my channel. Same thing with even medicinal astrology. And I know medical astrology is like, I don't want to say really popping off, but more and more people are going to get into it as people explore. Where would you recommend people start? What is like something too I like to ask people is like, what are you the most passionate about in that area?
Yeah, so I'm the most passionate right now about what I call holistic health and astrology. And so I'm differentiating. What I'm doing when I do that is using language to differentiate between medical astrology and holistic health and astrology, right? I'm like making it to where holistic health and astrology, anybody could pick up this practice or this book or this idea and they can immediately apply it. Versus medical astrology, where it's you use the word medical, you're like, well, I don't know enough about stuff to like tell people this or to know about it in my own.
Well, doctors don't either, so.
Right, exactly, yeah. And so I would try to remove myself or that, like when I'm in that practice of holistic health and astrology, I'm removing medical over here. And we're just talking about health and like some simple things that you should know about the body. Like right now I have a 12-month webinar series with Kepler College called Holistic Embodied Astrology. And so in that, like Cancer represents water metabolism. Like holistic health, so medical astrology is like, it rules the stomach, it rules the breast and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you don't even have to learn about all that shit to know in holistic health and astrology, how are you metabolizing your water?
Well, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I'm getting into this carnivore stuff. I got into all this because my dad passed away from cancer. His 8th house ruler is Scorpio, Mars retrograde in Cancer on a full moon in Cancer in the 4th house, and he literally died of cancer at his home. And I thought that was crazy seeing that in the chart. But what was crazy, I've been listening to more of these carnivore doctors that are kind of going off like the regular medical institutions and doing their own research and finding all these results, and they're starting to find out that cancer is a metabolic disease because the idea is like the mitochondria, the cancer cells only run off glucose. They actually can't run off ketones at all. So like and also too at cancer wards, they just pump them full of fucking sugar all day long, and they wonder why they're dying. Totally. But I thought like the fact that you're like, oh, it's like the process of metabolism is like, that's so crazy. I made that connection of like cancer is literally a metabolic disease, and this new like with all the information that's coming out, and it's crazy that symbology is literally just baked into the fucking sky.
Yep.
So I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but that was just a connection that I kind of made.
Reflection.
But so, how do most people come to you already kind of nuanced about their medical stuff and health, or how often do you find yourself having to break that layer of like willing to go down a little, because there's stuff where people people can only trust experts and they can only trust the doctors, and when you kind of it's really ingrained into society to trust authorities. It's that whole Saturn thing. How often do you find yourself having to get deeper into those layers with people versus how often do you see their walls come up?
Yeah, usually when people come to me, their walls are already down, especially online, let's say that, 'cause sometimes people come to me in person, their walls are very up, but also their wall being up is being shown by their body language, how they're talking, blah, blah. So it's easy to take their walls down for me because I just make everything simple, and yeah, a lot of people just, the way they're conditioned is just so incorrect that it's very easy for me to just say, how much water are you drinking? How are you eating? And then like say, so there's a lot of people who even say like, they're like, I don't like water, like they'll say that.
My God, yeah.
And so I'm like, well, do you like yourself? Because you're mostly water. And so like stuff like that will drop their walls, And so it's pretty easy. It's pretty easy. And a lot of times too, like people come to me, which is, it was like, for me, it was the issue to begin with, but like people would come to me as like a last resort. So they would already be in like the ending stages of their illness, or they'll be in a chronic state of illness. And so that was something that was like difficult at first for sure, because I would be like trying to tackle cancer, it's like, but now I'm like, well, let's start with like the most simple things. Let's learn how to be a human. Also, like how's your relationship with your doctor? Are you in connection with your doctor in a way that's like actually healthy, or are you trying to like oppose them? Can we create a team environment to make you feel supported? These are very fundamental things. People don't feel supported, and it's like, that's beyond astrology. That's beyond all this other stuff. It's like, are you drinking hot water? Because do you do the fucking dishes with cold water? It's like, if you do the dishes with cold water, you're not cleaning shit. You're not getting the gunk out. Sip hot water, breathe, and take this herb, come back to me in 2 weeks, tell me how you feel, learn your body more, and then we'll move forward from there. And what does your doctor recommend you do? That's interesting. Why did they say that? And then teaching them how to think about things.
I've been doing that a lot because I have a lot of people in like my Patreon and like followers where I try to tell them, like I said this not that long ago on a delineation of like the next time your psychologist who you shouldn't be, or your psychiatrist who you shouldn't be going to, when they prescribe you a pill, ask them how much they make off of it, and then you'll actually get a better idea as to why they're giving you these treatments, because they'll give you one pill and then they say, oh, that doesn't work, we'll take another pill, keep doing that one but take this other one, and they don't understand the profit motive. But so I want to ask you, as an astrologer, how have you navigated your own fears and your own bullshit approaching this? Because this is something, I get a lot of, I've been getting a lot of health stuff. More specifically, I've been getting a lot of vaccine injury people coming to me because they have nowhere else to go. They can't go to their friends, their schools, doctors, anything like that. And I have been really working on my just fear of talking about this stuff, or whether or not what I know or what I don't know. And you seem so confident in being able to just say, we're going to put all that to the side and this is how we're going to address it. How did you get that to that moment, and like how did you overcome, or did you even have any barriers like that, or am I just weird?
No. Yes, I've had a lot of barriers like that, and so really, again, I have to give so much gratitude to the plants. Like doing plant medicine is just like showed me the truth of things, and so I've just stayed chill about it. And I know, well, one thing too, both of the malefics for me are in Capricorn, so I'm great at just being like malefic or being seen as malefic. So it's like, that's going to be, anything that's a problem or fear based or anything like that, I'm just like stepping over it, stepping on it, shitting on it, don't give a fuck about it in that way. And it's just been a practice, practice facing that thing and like continuously confronting it and seeing what it does and what it doesn't do and adapting to it. And that's kind of how I rock with it, I don't want to say like don't be a little bitch about it, but like that's kind of how I orient towards myself in a way that's like me holding myself, right? It's like, wow, I was just so fucking scared, don't be a bitch about it. But it's like all those things come together, and that's actually, it's interesting because like that's my version of my self-care. Like, it's okay that I was scared, and also stop being a little bitch. It's all good, bro. It's like, just keep it moving. You're fine. Like, of course you're scared. You're a human. That's what's going to happen. And also, I'm not going to give myself an excuse to be more scared. Yeah. Or like to settle into that space.
Well, and the reason I ask is something that, I've been really trying to gear my content towards like men. Because I really think that this kind of tool could be really helpful, and I think that the spiritual community doesn't necessarily facilitate a space for men to be able to go in there and do their own thing. And something that has come up for me is like, I would say that the path that you're on is clearly your purpose. And what I would say is you seem so confident in knowing your purpose and going about that, it seems like you have had to unlock levels and levels of fear, and that's not easy. Like, I constantly am going through this stuff, and like currently right now I've got like Jupiter on my Saturn, so it's just very like I'm learning about all of this stuff. And it's so like, how would you tell people about that experience, or how would you tell people to navigate that experience for them? Because it's so much of like, yes, the fear is real, but also don't be a little bitch. And I always feel like that fear is your guideline of kind of like knowing where you should be going. If you're scared, that's the area you need to be going into.
Yeah. Also something about like, for longevity purposes of me, who I am, and how many people that I desire to be of service to on this planet, it's like, I have to know that I'm going to fuck up. I have to know that there's a lot of stuff I don't know, and I have to know that there's a lot of stuff that I do know, and I carry a certain type of medicine. And so people have to get clear around that. Like, what is the value that I'm actually bringing? What am I like in devotion to? What am I a disciple of? Because whatever you're a disciple of, your discipline will start to like merge with that, and you'll just continuously start working towards that aim. And so that's what I would say to people, like, find out what you're a disciple of and start finding some discipline around it, and just do that. And then just do that, and then just do that over and over again, and crystallize yourself. It's like the Saturnian work to do.
All these words are super Saturnian, but what do you mean by a disciple? Like, what are you a disciple of? What do you mean by that?
I'm a disciple of clarity, and so that means there's a lot of stuff. My perceived confidence is literally me just being like, I know a lot of stuff, I don't know a lot of stuff, and the stuff that I don't know, I know it, I don't know it in a lot of ways, and I'm confident about that too. So like, when I was younger, it was like all about like me being right, And so now I'm like, no, that hasn't changed. I'm still about being right. I just, totally, like, and I just like, so even when I'm like,
but right looks different for you now.
Exactly, right. So somebody says something, I'm like, I don't know, and I'm confident about that.
Yeah,
I'm confident that I'm not sure, and even in some things, I'm like, I'm confident that I have a good opinion on something that probably needs more growth and cultivation. I'm confident about all that. I'm confident about being insecure.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh shit, like I'm scared as hell of that shit. Like I'm confident about that.
So when you said that you're a disciple of clarity, what I heard was you have clearly maybe have thrown labels or titles in front of you, but being like, I wasn't expecting you to say I'm a disciple of clarity. That sounds like you have gotten to the root of what you are. Like you, like I would hear like someone be like, I'm a disciple of whatever, astrology, for example.
Yeah.
But like that's like a layer up versus like clarity sounds like that is like core like belief, core purpose stuff. How did you like? Well, again, I'm assuming it was part of like your evolutionary strategy, and I know it was a part of the plants. But I guess like on a mental level, what like how many times did you have to go through those layers to get to that point? Because that's not something that you just wake up with overnight.
Right, yeah. And I've only like realized I was a disciple of clarity in the last 6 months, so that's something that's like really, really new. Yeah, just I don't know the whole like to me like I'm always like thinking about like my Mars on the ascendant and how it's like literally
What degrees are Mars at?
4 degrees.
Okay.
Capricorn.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're 28.
29.
Oh,
Sag rising.
You're 29 Sag. Okay, we're both 20. I thought you were 28. I thought it was like a degree
29,
off. Yeah, so we're both 29 Sag rising.
Yeah, totally. So it's just like this trial and error process of bumping my fucking head, you know?
Yeah.
Until I like make it here, and then now like I've been writing more about like the things that I've been through because I'm like, when I sit down and talk, I'm like, wow, I went through that, and then wow, I went through that, and then wow, I went through that, and like that's how I got here, and I just am so perpetually in the like conscious awareness. And when I say conscious, not like I know, like conscious as in like I consciously want water, and it's like I'm so conscious of it that I'm not thinking about it. I'm literally going to get to water. It's just like a happening.
Like you know, it's kind of like how animals don't need to be told like when to hibernate or when to fuck or anything like that. It's a part of like just being connected with whatever you want to call it, I guess, is going on.
Yeah, primal instinct.
Primal instinct.
Totally. So that's how I made it there. And I mean, there was like these series of meditations that I was doing, and I also was having this relationship with the asteroid Vesta. And Vesta was the one that came and told me about devotion, and then I would like there was a specific aspect that happened with Vesta and Saturn, and I did a meditation on it when the moon was on Saturn, and then it connected the devotion to the discipleship, and then it was telling me I'm a disciple of clarity. And so since then I've just been in that process and making sure that clarity comes through me more and more and more, because if it's about clarity, then it's not about me making somebody feel good or feel bad, or somebody thinking that I'm nice, or me being mean, or me thinking I am who I am, and blah, blah, quack, quack. All these other things don't matter to me as much, because the root of it is clarity. And if clarity is not there, then I just still have more work to do, and I'm not worried about the other layers. So it's the root of everything now. And if clarity's not there, then like I can navigate other spaces or things that are happening, but it's really just about clarity. Even if the clarity is, oh yeah, we should never talk again, you know, and that's good. That's good to me.
Yeah,
because it's clarity.
Well, and clarity is also like something I've noticed too, is that it's hard to be clear when you're not honest about the situation at hand, and that can be like ignoring your feelings, ignoring your intuition, ignoring how you truly feel versus accepting that. That's what brings that clarity.
Totally.
How I mean, I feel like all my questions are coming back down to the same answer, which is totally, I mean, like the best thing, because it's what the truth is. I guess I would want to know, like, how do you navigate? I wouldn't say like, how do you navigate feeling clear or not? Because I feel like sometimes I might be like, oh, I'm clear about this situation, but maybe it's also because I'm, you know, looking at it through my projections and I'm not actually being honest with the situation at hand. How do you get to a level of, you know, you said that you meditated with the planets. Is that something that you do for the clarity? Is that something that you do, like, you know, if you're not feeling clear, do you just go for that? Or how do you know that you're not in clarity?
Yeah, totally. So, there was this thing that would come to me, this specific energy that would come to me, and it told me like maybe that was 3 years ago. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So it's like basically it would tell me like, Cameron, humans never have to be confused because you can know that you don't know, and that is also a version of clarity, of that I don't know yet. So what? I don't care. That's fine. I don't know yet. I don't have to. And then that takes away the swampiness of it. That takes away the confusion, the muckiness of it. And so that's a version of clarity that's moving me towards more pristine experience of clarity. And so I can be clear that I'm not clear. And just that in of itself brings me more clarity, and it helps me like unclench my eyes basically and then keep it moving. And so that's how I work with it, period. Straight up, all day, every day.
I can't. Now I'm too deep in thought to just have like a quick question for you after this, because this is the problem. We get two Sag risings together. I'm like, I have to think about this for a minute and process it for a minute. But this is one of the reasons I really enjoy talking to you, because you always have a like. I think in my practice and in my approach, I'm much more just hardcore, straight to the fucking just straight. People call me like I don't really like bullshit around, and not that any of the spiritual stuff is bullshit, but like I'm not necessarily the most like spiritually grounded person in my practice. However, that's something that a lot of people like claim that they are, but I don't. I mean, there's a lot of spiritual gurus out there that are very far away from any of that, and you can smell it from a mile away if you've just been paying attention long enough. Totally. But I really appreciate you having on, because you're so like, it was really cool asking you all of these different questions, and they all came back down to the same answer, because that's how you know it. You're rooted because you're consistent with that, and that's something I really admire about you, and that's what's so like I wanted to have you on because I like talking to you. Fuck everyone else. Like I just want to have I want to get this information and have information. So gosh, I mean, I guess we could probably start wrapping it up. I don't know. I feel like I kind of have more to think about before I could even come to another question. But I guess, gosh, where do you? So I think maybe the only thing to really close on is, because the big reason I wanted to have you on is, again, in this Pluto and Aquarian age, there is going to be a really big shift in, I think, how people look at ideas, and especially too when it comes to institutions and authorities and things like that. And where do you really see people struggle in terms of, for example, like getting in their own way in terms of like understanding themselves? Or I'm assuming, because you've been something I really like about you too is that you do like you're at a shop and you're doing the work all day long, and that's like really like people come to me all the time like, what course should I take? What book should I take? I'm like, either read the fucking source text or just do readings. Like that's how you learn it. You get into the field. But like, where do you see people really hit that block or that wall that really becomes, it's like I don't know what you would call it, but like it's kind of like that moment where you do all this work to a certain point, and then you hit that wall, and you either look at that as like a wall and a block, or just merely an obstacle to go around. And where do you see people really hit that challenge in terms of their own spirituality, their own journey, even and how that manifests in their health? Where do you see people hit that wall, and where do you see them overcome that stuff? Like where is it for them?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So a lot of times for me, the way I look at it is people, the way they hit that wall is like their own mental projection of what they should be or where they should be going, and not just being like present with what's happening in their life right now. And there's also this like thing where it's like somebody's learning astrology and they could talk to all their friends about it, and they could talk to these people about it, and they feel good, or like they're the person who knows the astrology, and then they get on Astro Twitter, and then they go like, and then they go listen to astrology podcasts, and they're like, oh shit, I don't know shit, and they're like get scared, or they get contracted by that, and I'm like, open yourself from inside, and keep blossoming forth, moving forward, and let that just be your fucking process. Let that be your process. Stay on the path, keep doing the work. And there will be plateaus sometimes. So it's like, if you don't acknowledge that there's going to be plateaus, then a plateau is a problem, when really it's not a problem, but it can be problematic. And people need to know the difference between the two. It's problematic that I hit this plateau and I feel bored and I don't feel like I'm good enough at this thing or whatever. That's not even I slap that out of people's hands. That's not a problem.
That I mean, I resonate with that, because I've recently been on that with my own astrology work and my content. It was hitting a plateau for a minute, and now I'm at the point of like, I'm just trying to I'm going even 10,000 times harder with everything that I'm doing, because it's so easy, I think, in the spiritual world to have spiritual growth, think you've overcome stuff, and then there's like a period where you go from I know everything to wow, holy fuck, like did I just regress or something, or am I going backwards?
Yeah.
So
that even makes me just think about the body, like as people go through like their experiences of feeling better, and then their body's like, oh, we're safe, cool, trauma,
yep,
cool. Now all this stuff that's been sitting in your lungs for 15 years and it's got caked up, now that can come out finally. And like that's what we do. Like the more we sink in, if you want to go to the core of things, the shit has to come up. So the deeper you go, the more you go into it, the more like you're sorting things out. And that takes like you sitting the fuck down and resting sometimes. That takes you feeling sadness. That takes all the insecurity that you weren't even confronting coming up. And so that is the whole process in and of itself. And people don't have that orientation or haven't been initiated into that knowing. And so that's the true block all the time.
Well, it sounds like you're very like I think of it. I can't wait to have Jen Zard on because she just has the fucking funniest astrology analogies. But I'm thinking of this as like there's like society might go about the malefics through the lens of an opposition versus you're coming to it from the lens of a conjunction of like, no, you should be with this energy, sit with this energy, move along with this energy, especially like I think of the moon, like being in the moment, being in the body with that versus like, you know, I guess in society we look at a problem, we look at it as like we have to face this problem and oppose this problem rather than like being with it in and of itself.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, like I kind of wish I was at your ISART lecture to hear a little bit more about this. Do you have any of your, so you're, God, the more I talk to you, the more you're everywhere. You're on Astrology Hub. You're on Kepler. You're doing where can everyone? What is all of the work that you're doing? Because you really are everywhere.
Totally, yeah. So I write monthly articles with Yoga Journal as well. So that's the thing. You can find me on that at Astrology Hub. I have a course on Astrology Hub. I'm in the Astrologer Connect with them as well. I do like weekly weather with them sometimes as well.
Okay.
Kepler College, I have a 12-month webinar series with them. I have a 5-week course out right now on holistic health and astrology with Synchronicity University with Nadia Shah. There's going to also be a second version of that. It's going to be more based off of like, it's not going to be necessarily less astrology, but it's going to be like applying a bunch of principles from outside of astrology and bringing it in so that you can learn how to work with the holistic health and astrology from a perspective of you don't have to know any medical stuff, and you can help every single person's health get better because these are the fundamentals. You shouldn't have to go to some expert. You know, it's the generalists are the winners of life oftentimes, you know, because if I can see all these things and I can work on each thing, just a small amount, then everything gets better continuously. So with Synchronicity University, there's something else I feel like I'm forgetting. Anyway, I won't worry about it. So those are all the places that people can find me. My Instagram is CADream6. My Twitter is CADream7. My website is www.cadreamplanet.com. And I haven't put it up yet, but I've been working with more like mentees and taking people through these like initiatory processes as well. And so I have like a 3-month, 6-month, 9-month, 12-month package.
Yeah, what is that? Because you mentioned that earlier, and I got really interested in that. What does that look like? What are you doing with people essentially?
Yeah.
Is that like a month reading thing, or
it could be a month reading thing? Sometimes it's 2 times a month. It's also like it's all based off of what is your intention here? What is your chart? How much do you know your chart? Are you trying to learn astrology, or are you trying to just become a better person in life and like understand yourself more? And so there will always be more astrology in the beginning, but then it'll end up being practices that you do. I will end up doing like people's what's called Tantric numerology for Kundalini yoga.
You know, in the very beginning, you brought up life paths, and I wanted to ask, what is your opinion about life path and numerology and the numbers with that?
Yeah, I think people emphasize the life path a bit much because there's so many other numbers that are present. I think it's cool. I think it's interesting. I think that's a part of my practice. Like even when I talk to numerology, I still like have to go to a book to reference things. So I don't feel like I'm like super deep in it, but I know like how to work with people in the practices. So I'm still figuring it out, feeling into it, and deepening in my understanding. That's where I would say I'm at with that. But also like working with people over a long period of time, they just have to go through certain initiations, especially if you do something over 3 months. The 3 months is like, let's do this. This is great, huh? And then it's like
after 90 days, that's the break.
Dun dun dun.
Well, I'm working.
That's when I get more Saturnian usually.
Well, I'm working on a like a coaching course right now that it's going to be very slow as it kind of gets rolled out. But that's something I've been thinking a lot about. Is like it would be like, you know, all dependent on the time of people's transits and all that stuff. But like, yeah, the level of commitment, the level of days is a completely different. Like, I feel like it's the same thing with an astrology reading. Like people don't really know what they're signing up for. Like when it comes to like the work that they have to do or the commitment, the level of like, and it's so easy to get excited about that kind of stuff. But then when it's like when you're in it to actually do the work, it becomes a lot more real after like that 90-day point.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and also with everybody I work with, they start to understand like how their emotions are their physical body and how that like has to do with their spiritual path and how all those things synthesize together. So it's like the deepest knowledge of self, to where like somebody could be like, and I just would use a Gemini. It's like somebody's like, you talk too much, and it's like, yeah, I do, and this is my thing. I talk a lot, and I'm a Gemini, and like. And I know now when I'm talking too much because I'm compensating and it fucks up my nervous system. And when I'm not, you know, it's like, so just like little things like that in life, just like self-understanding.
I do that a lot with because as a Leo, which is not something in society people like when you're very like on that spectrum of like overly Leo, but I totally feel it. Like there's times where I'm like, no, I like, you know, there are people that are meant to be in the spotlight, and then there's a knowing, like when you're getting sunburned, when are you too much in the sun, and how do you counterbalance that? But that's something I've been really tuning into with my own chart, and just being able to like let a planet healthily come out without it necessarily being too extreme this way or that way. Because I think that's the other hard part about society right now, is everything is just, there's no like middle ground. As a Libra, I'm like, can we please just agree on what things we actually agree on? But it's no, it's got to be blanket statement this way or blanket statement that way. And I find that very hard to navigate on like a spiritual, energetic level of like the whole point is like being you want to be balanced with your spiritual, with your energy, right? And in a world that is completely polarized, it becomes harder and harder, I think.
Yeah, I would say anybody who's like having any difficulty with polarization, acknowledge that it's fake. It's not real, you know? It's like even in the body, like this is a perfect example. Even in the body, they call it homeostasis. When the fuck is it ever stasis? When is it ever still? When is there ever this one thing? It's never that. It's always in constant flux. It's always in constant motion. If you know anything about balance, you're never going to be in one point. You're always having to like, there's so many factors involved.
Different than stagnation.
Right, exactly. You know, there's so many things involved. You know, there's all these micro adjustments that have to happen. It's never this or that. It's this, that, and this, and this. It's all those things are happening at once. And once people can start to see that, then polarization can be talked about, unpacked, but it dissolves to be something that is like, even it's a joke, honestly, on some level, you know. So,
and you said, you know, it's just like you said like the stagnation is not even real. This reminded me of something. I've brought this up on my channel a few times, but between Plato and Socrates, I can't remember which one was which here, but I believe it was like Socrates that was like, in life there is growth, and then there is stability, and then there is decay. And Plato argued that there is no stability in life. Look at a tree. A tree is either growing or it's dying.
Totally.
And it's either this way or that way, and there is really no like middle point at that.
Right, yeah. And so, and I would even say there, the stability becomes the ability to go back and forth is the actual stability. And so not thinking of it as something that's solid, but something that like can like flow and move, right? And so that's what stability from my perspective, stability is adaptability.
Stability is adaptability. I'm thinking about this in terms of, because my problem with that Plato argument is the fixed signs, and like how do you connect if there's no stability in life, then why are there fixed signs? And what does that mean for a fixed sign, right? Is that about just continuing something, or is that about like solidifying something? But then, I mean, you just said like a stability is adaptability, which I kind of like as like a fixed leading into a mutable sign, which are so mutable. Well, you also brought up something about like health is all about mutability, which I love for like Pisces, Sag, Virgo, Gemini. I love that for all of that. But anyway, we should probably start wrapping this up. Anything else that you have to say to anybody? No?
I feel pretty content. Appreciate you.
Good, of course. Well, thank you so much for your time. I was super honored to have you here. I'm super glad that we were able to make it. You already mentioned all of your ads. Make sure you follow Cam. And with that being said, I guess I'll be seeing you guys all next time.
Peace.